Hello, and welcome back to Felony Spectator. I am your host, Heather. On today's episode, we're talking about the murder of Hae Min Lee. This case has been very popular because Hae's ex-boyfriend was convicted to life in prison based on one person's testimony, and there is zero physical evidence. There's lots to go through, so let's begin. Hae Min Lee was born in Korea, but when she was around 12 years old, her mother emigrated from Korea to the United States with her brother, to live with their grandparents. Her father decided to remain in Korea, and it's said that he cut ties when they came to America. Hae's mother would get into a new relationship where she got engaged to a man who lived in California. Hae, her mother, and brother lived in California for about 6 months, but her mom's relationship ended and they all moved back to Baltimore in 1996. Hae's relationship with the ex-father figure has been up for debate, but it was said that Hae mentioned she did spend time in California during her sophomore year with either friends or family. When Hae turned 18 years old, she would still be in her last year at Woodlawn High in Baltimore, Maryland. Hae got good grades, had a great group of friends, and was basically just like any other teenager. Principal James Wilson would remember Hae as a warm person and well-liked by the other students. Hae was also athletic and liked to play lacrosse and field hockey, and she would manage the boys' wrestling team. Not only was she busy with sports and friends, she also worked part-time at LensCrafters as she wanted to become an optician. While attending high school, Hae would also meet and fall in love with Adnan Syed. When prom rolled around, Adnan and one of his friends wanted to bring the prettiest girls to prom, and someone suggested that Adnan ask Hae. Adnan was said to be handsome, was flirty, and lots of girls really liked him, so Hae was excited when he asked her, and she said yes. And this would be the beginning of their relationship. April 27th, 1998 was prom night, and it seemed like that was the night she instantly fell in love with Adnan. Adnan was prom prince, and Adnan's best friend Stephanie was prom princess. When it was time for the prince and princess to have their dance together, Adnan wouldn't bring Stephanie out on the dance floor. Instead, he brought Hae on the dance floor, and this melted her little teenage heart. It seemed like from that day on, the two were smitten with each other. Hae would write in her diary the love she felt for Adnan, but there was one obstacle in their way, and it would be Adnan's religion and their strict families. This resulted in Adnan and Hae keeping their relationship a secret. Adnan wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend, and Hae was also expected to focus on her studies. So it was only their school friends that really knew what was going on. This would be back in 1998. So they would use their pagers and page each other if the coast was clear to talk on the phone. Or sometimes Adnan would just show up at Hae's friends' homes if he knew she was there. They had lots of little tricks that they do to connect without their families knowing. I do want to point out it's only speculated that Hae had a pager. Friends seem to think that she did, but family would say that she didn't. So perhaps her having a pager was also a secret, but it's not 100% confirmed. Adnan was a very smart, kind kid, and the community really liked him. He worked as an EMT, regularly went to mosque, and had really good grades as well. He was generally well-liked and very much into his Muslim faith. According to Hae's diary, her religion didn't really mean that much to her, but she thought for Adnan, his Muslim faith meant a great deal to him. At least in Hae's eyes, but I think for both of them, it was really a matter of not upsetting their families. Hae would say that Adnan was the sweetest boy. She would say that every day she'd fall more and more in love with him. It's said they also secretly had sex in the car, which a lot of people didn't know about. But Hae started to feel guilty because she knew that Adnan's religion was important to her, and she knew one day he would have to choose between the religion or her, and he'd most likely pick his faith. Hae and Adnan would attend the homecoming dance together, but Adnan's family realized that he was lying about something, and his mother had a gut feeling that he was probably going to go to the dance, and maybe with a girl. His parents would actually show up at the school and drag Adnan out of prom. And Hae was really upset and angry by this, and she didn't understand what the big deal was. And this would be one of the main things that solidified Hae's decision to end the relationship. Hae would break up with Adnan shortly after homecoming because the chaos of that night just really proved to Hae that this relationship really would never work out, even though she did really love Adnan. The stress of being with someone you couldn't truly be with was just too much. So after about 8 months together, they'd officially break up. Apparently, they would get back together and break up a few times, but by December of 1998, it was over. And she was also fully crushing on a coworker at LensCrafters named Don Clinedinst. Don and Hae had worked together at LensCrafters in Owings Mills Mall. He was 20 years old, and Hae was really into him. She couldn't get Don out of her mind. Don drove a Camaro, he had blue eyes, and was older. She would gush about Don in her diary, and by Christmas time, she pursued Don. New Year's Day, she'd have her first date with him, dinner at Olive Garden. It said that Adnan knew about Don. Hae had apparently told him, and I'm sure Adnan didn't like hearing that, but there was no indication that Adnan was angry or jealous. In fact, their friendship had remained, and one time Hae even called Adnan after getting into a little fender bender in the LensCrafters parking lot. She wanted Adnan to come look at her car, and while doing so, Don would see them in the parking lot and stop to see if everything was okay. So Don and Adnan had met, which I'm sure was awkward, but nobody mentioned anything about it after, and it didn't seem like an issue at the time either. Hae would tell her friends that being friends with Adnan was actually better for her because now there was no longer any pressure. She still cared for Adnan, but it was easier and more natural to hold a friendship with him. Most of their friends would say after the breakup, Adnan was sad for a day or two, but it seemed like a normal teenage breakup. Adnan's best friend Syed said Adnan had dated other girls right away. In fact, Adnan and Syed were trying to be players. He would be seen making out with girls at parties and getting phone numbers as well. He even met a girl at a New Year's Eve party named Nisha, and everything seemed normal. There is assumptions that Adnan perhaps thought that him and Hae would get back together, and perhaps Hae had led him on a little bit, but again, that's just an assumption. During senior year, every day after school, Hae was supposed to pick up her cousins from daycare around 3:15. And this was a responsibility she took very seriously. But on January 13th, 1999, Hae never showed up. The daycare would call her uncle and inform him that nobody came. And he immediately contacted Hae's family, who called police, as this was completely out of character. In the original police report, it says that her brother spoke with police, and he didn't think Hae had any engagements after school, but she was supposed to go to LensCrafters in the evening for work. Hae's brother would also say that this was the first time his sister had ever done anything like this before, and she's usually really reliable. His sister's life is good, and he wasn't aware of any problems. Hae was last seen driving her mother's 1998 Nissan Sentra out of the parking lot after school, but after that, her whereabouts are unknown. Police spoke with the manager of LensCrafters and confirmed that Hae had not shown up for work, and they hadn't heard from her either. Hospitals were contacted, hotels, motels. They searched parking lots with no luck. Police would also call her friends as well. Friends confirmed that they saw Hae at school and saw her at the end of the day as well. A friend named Becky said she might have heard Hae tell Adnan that she couldn't give him a ride because she had something important to do immediately after school. What that is, we don't know. Inez Butler, a teacher who worked at the school, was at the concession when Hae drove up to order an apple juice between 2:15 and 2:25, and she believed Hae to be alone. I later found out that Inez also claimed that Hae told her that she was returning back to the school for a wrestling match, but this contradicts a few things. Hae also spoke with a girl named Summer near the gymnasium regarding the wrestling match that was to happen later in the day. Hae helped coach the wrestling team, so Summer was talking to her about that, but Hae wasn't able to take the bus with her because she had something to do. And then she had to work later. And this kind of annoyed Summer because Hae was supposed to be helping her. But there are other accounts that say that Hae didn't show up to the wrestling match, and that was what annoyed Summer. Police also tried to contact Don, Hae's boyfriend, and when the police tried to contact him that day, they were unsuccessful. Adnan was also contacted that evening around 6:30 p.m. and informed the police that he last saw her at school around the time classes ended. He mentioned that Hae was supposed to give him a ride, but he was running late and Hae had left without him. So he went to the library right after school and then to track practice. He hadn't heard from her and didn't know where she was. When police finally spoke with Don, Hae's boyfriend, it was on the 14th, the following day. He too told the police that he hadn't seen her or heard from her and that the last time they spoke was on the 12th. They had hung out and Hae actually wanted to skip school on the 13th and hang out with Don, but he convinced her not to. Don also said that he picked up a shift at work in the afternoon of the 13th, and Don and Hae were supposed to see each other after her shift on the 13th around 10 p.m., but she never showed up. His alibi apparently checked out, and his manager confirmed he was working at LensCrafters on the 13th, the day Hae went missing. Strangely, Don never reached out to Hae to find out where she was when she didn't call him or show up for their date. Granted, they were only dating for 2 weeks, but it is curious why he never tried to find out where she was. With that said, Adnan also didn't try and contact Hae either. But this is talked about a lot more. People find it very suspicious that Adnan never tried to call or page Hae in the days after she disappeared. But nobody seems as bothered by the fact that her boyfriend didn't. The next 2 days after Hae disappeared, there was a huge snowstorm. So school was closed on Thursday and Friday, and then it was the weekend. So when the kids got back to school on the following Monday, 5 days later, people didn't really notice Hae's absence right away. Hae was in a program called the Magnet Program, which was an enrichment-style program. And most of Hae's circle of friends, as well as Adnan, were in this program. And these kids had a lot more freedom, and many in the program had already enough credits to graduate, so they sometimes missed school or would take half days off. So for Hae not to be at school wouldn't have been alarming. And this wouldn't be great for the investigation because people's memories of the 13th were now getting fuzzy. Nothing stood out, and people had a hard time remembering details of what happened that day. There was also a rumor that she may have gone to California to see her father. So again, people didn't know she was actually missing. On February 1st, a little over 2 weeks after Hae goes missing, police would start questioning teachers. Police were thinking perhaps Adnan, the ex-boyfriend, might know something more, and they wanted to see if anyone noticed anything suspicious. One teacher, Hope Schaub, a French teacher, would be questioned about Adnan's and Hae's relationship. Hae sometimes worked as an assistant to Hope, and the two developed a pretty good relationship. Hope was only 27, so being that she was a young teacher, the students often trusted her and opened up to her. So police would ask Hope to question students to find out where Adnan and Hae were having sex. So when Adnan caught wind of Hope asking these students about his sex life, he took offense to this and told her to stop and to butt out. I sort of feel like Adnan's bluntness in asking her to stop maybe offended Hope, because she would be the only teacher to speak negatively about Adnan. So Adnan had already been questioned by police a few times at this point, but he was always with his father, and while he tried to be truthful and answer the questions, he did keep things out about the relationship in fear of his parents' disapproval. He definitely didn't want them to know he was having sex with Hae. And Hae wasn't Adnan's only secret. He also smoked weed, he drank, he went to parties, and that might not seem like such a big deal as he was a teenager after all, but to a Muslim family, this behavior would be very frowned upon. And lots of these secrets would start to reveal themselves during the investigation. And I think this was one of the main reasons why Adnan was targeted as a suspect, because he seemed to have a lot of secrets. I should point out that I don't think lying to your parents about partying, drinking, having sex is exclusively a Muslim thing. I feel like most teens lie a lot about what they do on weekends. But for some reason, Adnan being Muslim and lying would continue to come up over and over again during this case. Adnan was also the one who had told police that Hae might have been in California. Now, nobody knows the real relationship between this father figure in California and Hae. But this rumor going around school is believed to have been started by one of her girlfriends, not Adnan. But police would be suspicious that Adnan said this to them as if he was trying to throw them off. Hae had no real reason to run away to California. Her life was good, she had a new boyfriend, her grades were really good, and it was also said that Hae was very happy and actually excited for a trip to France with the school. So why would she run away to another state? Police would contact authorities in Haywood, California to see if Hae was with her mother's ex-fiancé, but nothing turned up and that lead ended. Police took Hae's computer, and the Computer Crimes Unit subpoenaed AOL for records to Hae's email accounts, but strangely, nothing comes of this either. There was no reports of emails or information, so we'll assume that was also a dead end. Almost a month later, a man named Alonzo Sellers, who worked as a maintenance man at a local school, stopped his vehicle to go pee in Lincoln Park near the downtown of Baltimore. The interesting thing about Alonzo is that he has a very colorful past. Alonzo has been arrested about 8 times from 1994 to 2015 for indecent exposure, as he liked to go streaking and flash people. One time while he was running around showing off his man parts, he accidentally flashed a female officer. Anyway, on February 9th, he claims to have been drinking a 22-ounce Budweiser on the way to work and needed to go to the bathroom. And I guess he couldn't wait until he got to work, which was only about 10 minutes away. So he would pull over and walk across the road and continue to walk a little over 100 to 120 yards into the park to relieve himself. As he was about to go, to his right, he saw what looked like hair and possibly a hip sticking out of a mound of dirt and leaves, behind a pretty big, large fallen tree. Even though he had to go pee really badly, he didn't pee, and instead he ran out of there and went to work and called police. Sadly, it would be Hae who was buried in this shallow grave in Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park is huge, and if you Google what Lincoln Park is, you'll see it's dubbed the city's largest unregistered graveyard due to the amount of bodies that have been found there. It's an inner city park, but there are trails and some people do walk through the park, but a lot of people don't even know that it is a park. They just assume it's a big vacant space. Alonzo even admitted that he didn't know Lincoln Park very well. Alonzo would go back to the site later with city surveyor Phil Buddenmeyer, who later testified that in his opinion, Hae's body was quite camouflaged to the point where he almost stepped on Hae's body. Now, the sun was setting by the time they returned, so that could have played a part of why she was camouflaged, but people would wonder how Alonzo noticed Hae's body so easily when Philip couldn't. Also, how much of a coincidence it was that Alonzo happened to choose that spot to pee, and why someone who wasn't shy with nudity went that far into the park to relieve himself. Alonzo did take a lie detector test, which was 4 questions long. The questions were, are you attempting to withhold information about the death of the female you found in the park? Did you do anything to the girl to cause her death? Have you ever been in the company of the girl before you found her in the park? And have you ever been to that spot where the girl was found? Now, even though these seem like 4 very straightforward questions, he failed. And I read the test results, and they basically say that Alonzo seemed preoccupied, and he was nervous and time conscious, constantly looking at his watch. He also disclosed that he had a meeting with a realtor and his wife needed to be picked up from work. So the examiner suggested a retest, but did also mention significant responses would normally indicate deception. Alonzo was retested 2 weeks later, and the second time he passed. And some people would say that his second group of questions were even easier to answer. And some of these questions were, did you know if the girl you found in the park died because she was poisoned? Did you know if the girl in the park you found died because she was run over by a car? Did you know if the girl you found died because she was stabbed? And these 7 questions were all worded the same way. Alonzo was cleared as a suspect because he passed the second test. Now let's talk about the body a little bit. So near the body, they found a bottle of brandy and a rope, which they never tested for DNA. They found fibers above and below the body as well as hair that was not Hae's. It would be hair on the back of her head, her hip, and foot, partially sticking out of the ground. And there is a mock-up of how she was found. So she's sort of on her right side, but twisted facing down. Her face is on her right arm, which is under her, and her left arm is out by her side. And the blue parts in the photo is what was sticking out of the ground. There was a rock either holding down her right hand due to rigor mortis, or it's just simply covering her right hand. She was still in her clothes, but her shirt and bra were pulled up above her chest. Her skirt was gathered around her waist, but her pantyhose were still intact, and there was also no signs of sexual assault. She wasn't wearing shoes, and she still had all her jewelry on, so it was obviously not a robbery. Hae's body was relatively intact for someone who was buried in a very shallow grave for upwards of 3 weeks, meaning there was no evidence that animals, big or small, tried to eat her body while it sat outside. I found the autopsy report online, and it did say decomposition was taking place, but no superficial wounds. So nothing from being dragged, so she was most likely carried, and no scratches from animals digging. It was winter, so there is a possibility that she was preserved a little bit better than any other time of year, but the lack of animal markings has come up a lot. Another issue is the lividity on the body shows that after Hae was murdered, she was placed face down, almost stretched out after her death, with the lividity concentrating on her upper torso, chest area. Lividity is how the blood settles when a person dies. Since the heart isn't beating and the blood isn't moving, it settles. So if a body is laying on their front, gravity would pull the blood in the direction of their front and create a mark similar to a bruise. If a body is moved, there can be more than one lividity marking. For example, if someone is face down when they die, left there for an hour or so, then get turned over, there will be lividity marks on their front and their back. This means coroners can usually tell when a body is moved if there are multiple marks. Lividity can also occur anywhere upwards of 8 to 12 hours. After 8 to 12 hours, those marks no longer take place. Hae didn't have marks to show that she was moved in that first 8 to 12 hours. So some experts thought perhaps she wasn't buried until after the 8 to 12 hour mark, because the lividity marks really didn't match perfectly that well with how she was found. Her body also had 2 pressure marks. There were 2 diamond-shaped marks near her shoulders that show that she was lying on something after she died, and something with a very specific shape. Lividity marks won't occur around pressure points as the blood can't pool there. So what caused those marks? I don't know. If we want to further discuss the lividity, let's do so in the comments because I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Coroners ruled that Hae's cause of death was due to manual strangulation, but there was also blunt force injuries to the right back and right side of her head as well. There isn't much discussion on head trauma for some reason, and investigators seem to focus mainly on the strangulation. Back at school, when students learned that Hae had been found murdered, they were extremely upset, as was Adnan. They said he seemed very depressed, except for Hope Schaub, who thought he was overacting. Just 3 days after Hae's body was found, police would receive 2 anonymous phone calls back to back saying that they should focus their investigation on the ex-boyfriend. According to the caller, Adnan sometimes took Hae to Lincoln Park to have sex with her. Adnan denies that, and there is no proof that he ever actually took her there. Anyway, the caller also said the police should speak with someone named Basir Ali, as he might know more. Now, there's no such person as Basir Ali, but there's a Yasser Ali, a friend of Adnan's. Yasser met with police at Pizza Hut, saying that he didn't make this anonymous phone call, and he wasn't able to confirm anything the anonymous caller had said, and he actually seemed really confused. Yasser did inform police that both himself and Adnan were actually drifting apart due to Adnan's relationship with Hae, because Adnan seemed to want to spend most of his time with her and her friends. However, the 2 boys had been seeing each other more during January because of Ramadan. Both went to mosque daily for prayer, but Ramadan ended on January 16th, and he had no further information that was helpful to police. There was another witness who walked into the Baltimore Police Department saying that he remembers seeing someone suspicious near Lincoln Park recently, possibly related to the crime he saw on the news about the girl. He claims to have seen a black man in a light-colored car near some concrete roadblocks on the road leading to the park. And this report doesn't say what the suspicious man was doing, what day he was seen, so it seems like police brushed off this witness statement. In the meantime, police would request Adnan's cell phone records. Coincidentally, Adnan had bought his cell phone just 2 days before the murder. Police wondered if maybe he bought this phone as part of a plan to murder his ex-girlfriend. And police were really starting to think that he was a scorned ex-boyfriend that wanted her dead because he was heartbroken. According to Adnan, he saved his money to buy this cell phone because he wanted more freedom. Remember, he had a really strict religious family, so he wasn't allowed to date girls. Having his own phone would mean that he could call girls without his parents monitoring him. Now, at this point, Adnan still hadn't obtained a lawyer. He never even thought about it. His best friend Syed told him, perhaps jokingly, that police always suspect the ex-boyfriend. But Adnan thought that that was crazy and police would find who did it, never thinking that he'd be the main suspect. When police reviewed Adnan's cell phone records, they would see that Adnan had called Hae 3 times the night before she went missing. The first 2 calls were only a few seconds long, and the last one was about 17 seconds. When Adnan was later questioned on this, he couldn't remember why he called Hae, but thought it was possible just to give Hae his new cell phone number. And this would make sense because in Hae's diary, her last entry had Adnan's number written over the top. Phone records would also show that the day Hae went missing, there would be over 34 calls going in and out, with 6 of those calls going to someone named Jennifer Pusateri. Jennifer was a good friend of a man named Jay Wilds. Jay Wilds was sort of a friend and acquaintance of Adnan because Jay was dating Adnan's good friend Stephanie, and we'll get back to that. Investigators would go to Jennifer's house to try and speak with her, and at first she panicked. She didn't want to speak with them and jumped into the car saying that she was on her way to bring dinner to her boyfriend. She didn't end up going to get dinner, but instead she went to go see Jay. Later that same evening, she would end up going to the police station for a recorded interview and tell investigators that the calls weren't actually from Adnan, but from her friend Jay Wilds. Jay had Adnan's phone and car that afternoon. And in this first interview, there's no mention of Adnan whatsoever, other than that Jay had borrowed Adnan's car and phone. Jennifer then comes back the following morning, and this time she arrives with her mom and an attorney, and now her story completely changes drastically. She claims Jay told her that Adnan killed Hae. She then talks for over 2 hours, giving police her account of what happened that day. And this interview can be found online, but it basically says that she called Jay after she got off work around noon to ask if he wanted to hang out. Jay would then go to her house and hang out between 12:30 and 1, driving Adnan's car, and he had the cell phone. He says he was waiting for a phone call, and that call would come in around 3:30 to 3:45, and he left her house somewhere between 3:45 to 4:15. After Jay leaves, she does some errands, gets dinner, and then gets a page from Jay asking her to pick him up. And for some reason, she was confused by this page, so she called Adnan's phone around 7 to 8 p.m. So I guess she either knew he still had the phone or that they'd be together. But Adnan answered, and he would tell her that Jay would call her back when he was ready to be picked up. Then between 8 and 8:30, she got another page from Jay confirming that he was now ready and to get him from Westview Mall parking lot. When she arrived, Jay and Adnan were in a car together when she got there, and Jay would then get into her car and revealed that Adnan had killed Hae. She goes on to say that Jay saw the body in the trunk, but he wasn't involved. Jay said that he met Adnan at the 600th block of Franklintown Road, where Adnan showed him Hae's body and asked help to bury it. Jay then asked Jen that they go get rid of the shovels, and I think she means wipe them down because the shovels were already in a dumpster. So she takes Jay to this dumpster where they wipe them down. He then asked to be taken to Stephanie's house, his girlfriend. She did mention that Jay didn't seem dirty, his hands and clothes were clean, and she didn't mention if Jay or Adnan seemed strange. Apparently, Jay told her that after Adnan showed him the body, he dropped Jay off somewhere, it's not said where, and then picked him up later to bury Hae. Then the following day on the 14th, Jen took Jay to another dumpster so he could dispose of the clothes he wore the night before, and she mentioned that it was raining. Now, if we take what she says at face value, there are some issues. One being that if this actually happened, she is an accessory after the fact. Why wouldn't she call the police? Maybe it's because she's young, maybe she was scared, but if her friend Jay had nothing to do with this murder, then why keep it a secret? Why didn't either of them call the police? It was also not raining on the 14th, and it's strange that she mentioned the weather. The 14th was actually a snow day, and the roads were so bad that most people weren't driving anywhere and school was canceled. After Jen's interview, Jay Wilds would be the next person police questioned. He first denied having anything to do with Adnan or Hae at all, but at some point he decides to give the police his point of view of the night in question. The first 2 hours of his interview, he was not recorded, so we don't know what was said. It's possible police didn't record anything until he admitted to having something more to say. Jay claims that on the 13th, Adnan went to his house around 10:30 a.m., and together they went to Westview Mall. Jay then drops Adnan off at school at 12:30, but keeps Adnan's car. Adnan also left his cell phone in the car because he wasn't allowed to bring it to school. And this is when Adnan announces he's going to kill Hae because she broke his heart. Jay claims he brushes off this statement and drives Adnan's car to his friend Jen's house. But Jen isn't home, so he hangs out with her brother playing video games, which is slightly different than Jen's story. At 3:40, Adnan calls and asks him to come meet him, saying, quote, "That bitch is dead. Pick me up at Edmonton's Avenue," end quote. So Jay did. Jay would go on to say that Adnan popped the trunk and he saw a, quote, "Oriental girl," end quote, who was already dead and had already started to turn blue, but he couldn't see her face. Next, they take the car with Hae in the trunk to the interstate park and ride close to Lincoln Park, and Jay then takes Adnan back to school for track practice around 4:30. He then picks him up again later around 6:45 p.m. after track, and they go eat at a restaurant, even though Adnan is fasting for Ramadan. While there, Adnan would get a call from police asking where Hae is at some point, and Adnan panics and asks Jay for shovels. They go back to Hae's car and take her to Lincoln Park, where Adnan buries Hae while Jay watches. Then they take Hae's car to a lot by some row homes, and they discard Hae's wallet, book bag, shovels, a pick, into a dumpster. He then claims Adnan tells him that the windshield wiper got broken when Adnan strangled Hae. He thinks Adnan may have told others about this murder as well, but he doesn't know who. Now, Jay and Adnan were friends, but not close. In fact, they were more like acquaintances. They had originally met in junior high and rode their bikes together occasionally, but didn't really hang out. It wasn't until more recently that they had started smoking weed together because Jay was kind of a small-time weed dealer who was also dating Stephanie, who was Adnan's best friend. It does feel weird that Adnan would confide in Jay, who is more of an acquaintance, with something so huge like murder. But Jay feels it's because he's a drug dealer. And Jay plays it up like he's got this bad reputation, even though he's only a very small-time weed dealer, and he doesn't own a phone or a pager. Police would then take Jay and recover the car since Jay knew where they dumped it. The windshield wiper wasn't broken, but police did recover all sorts of other items in Hae's car, as well as some clothes that had a very small amount of blood on them. The blood would later be identified as Hae's. Now the police had Hae, they had her car, and they have Jay and Jen's witness statements pointing towards Adnan. It's time to bring Adnan in. So on Friday, February 28th, 1999, while Adnan was sleeping, police would burst into his home and arrest him for the murder of Hae Min Lee. When Adnan was confronted with this information, he denied everything. He's so confused and says that he doesn't understand where this story came from and why Jay was saying this. But why would Jay implicate himself? The only thing Adnan could think of was that Adnan's relationship with Stephanie was too close. Nobody liked that Stephanie was dating Jay, especially Adnan. Stephanie was really smart, she was a good student, super pretty, and it didn't make sense that she was dating this small-time weed dealer. And Adnan was really, really good friends with Stephanie, so much so that people often thought they were dating. Before he dated Hae, Stephanie would be seen sitting in his lap. They'd sometimes even kiss on the lips. They were often together, phoned each other every day, and were even voted prom king and queen right before he started to date Hae. Was it possible that Jay did this and framed Adnan? He had the car and the phone, so it could have been really easy. Adnan said he loved Hae, he didn't want her dead, and there was no motivation for him to kill his ex-girlfriend. He wasn't mad at her, but who would want her dead? Adnan admitted to hanging out with Jay the day Hae went missing, but he doesn't have a lot of details about that specific day because to him, it was just a regular boring day. What he does remember is that he had given Stephanie a stuffed reindeer for her birthday that morning, and Adnan had asked Jay if he had gotten Stephanie something since Jay was the boyfriend. And this is what led Adnan to lending Jay his car so he could go shopping, telling him to pick him up after track. So Adnan thinks he went to the school library after school to study before track practice started. He doesn't really remember what else happened, and this would be the biggest problem with Adnan's defense. He just couldn't come up with anything and claims he just doesn't remember. And this is where we're going to end today. I might actually make this 3 or 4 parts because it's really, really long. So stick with me, hit subscribe so you know when the other parts come out, and we will see you next week.